The white coat felt heavier than I expected, folded over my arm as I stood backstage, listening to the low hum of hundreds of proud families filling the auditorium. I kept glancing toward the door, waiting for a familiar face, until my phone buzzed in my pocket. I already knew, somehow, before I even looked down. "Sorry, we couldn't make it. Your brother's ski trip was already booked." 12 words. 12 words to erase 4 years of exhaustion, sacrifice, and hope. I stood there, coat in my arms, wondering how I was supposed to walk onto that stage with a smile when the two people I most wanted to see weren't coming. This wasn't new. It had never been new. For as long as I could remember, my parents' attention bent like light around my younger brother Dylan. He was charming in that effortless way people mistake for brilliance. Quick with a joke, easy with a smile, always managing to turn his mistakes into someone else's problem. I was the responsible one, the one who studied instead of partied, who worked summer jobs instead of asking for allowance, who chose late nights with textbooks over birthday parties. I quietly stopped expecting anyone to remember. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, became enough, eventually they would look at me the way they looked at him. Medical school was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be the thing that finally made them proud enough to show up. For months, I'd built up the ceremony in my mind like a lighthouse at the end of an impossible swim. I called my parents personally to invite them, sent the date the moment I received it, followed up with hotel suggestions near the campus, printed out the ceremony schedule, and mailed it to them just so there'd be no excuse to forget. They said yes. They said they wouldn't miss it for the world. Then, 1 week before the ceremony, Dylan mentioned a ski trip. Some friends were going to a resort in Colorado, the kind of place with heated pools and private chalets, and he wanted to go. He didn't have the money. He never had the money. But somehow, within days, my parents had booked flights, not just for him, but for themselves, to make sure he was safe and to spend quality time together as a family. When I asked, gently, carefully, if they were still coming to my ceremony, my mother sighed like I was the unreasonable one. "There will be other ceremonies, sweetheart. This trip is already paid for." I didn't argue. I'd learned a long time ago that arguing only made me the villain in a story where I was already invisible. I hung up the phone, sat on the edge of my bed, and cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry in years. Quiet, controlled sobs, the kind you learn to keep small when no one has ever come running to check on you. My roommate found me like that and didn't ask questions, just sat beside me in silence. The next day, my mentor, Dr. Ellison, noticed the shadows under my eyes and pulled me aside. "Whatever's weighing on you," she said, "don't let it convince you that you don't deserve to celebrate what you've earned." I nodded, but I didn't quite believe her yet. The night of the ceremony arrived faster than I wanted it to. Students filed in wearing our best formal clothes, nervous energy buzzing through the hallway like static. Families packed the auditorium, phones raised, flowers in hand, banners with names scrawled across them in glitter pen. I scanned the crowd out of habit rather than hope, my eyes finding the 2 empty seats I had reserved weeks ago. Empty, just as I'd known they would be. But something unexpected happened as the ceremony began. My friend Priya's parents, seated a few rows back, caught my eye and waved enthusiastically, mouthing, "Good luck," like I was their own. My study group had saved me a seat among their families, insisting I sit with them instead of alone. One of my professors, Dr. Whitfield, gave me a small nod from the front row, the kind that said, "I see you, and I'm proud of you," even though we'd never spoken outside of class about anything personal. The dean, walking past the row of soon-to-be coded students, paused just briefly at me, offering a smile that felt oddly knowing, like she already understood more than I'd told anyone. When my name was called, I walked onto that stage with my knees shaking, expecting the same polite applause everyone else received. Instead, my classmates rose to their feet in a standing ovation that startled me so much I nearly stumbled. Dr. Whitfield helped me into the white coat, and as the dean reached for my certificate, she paused. Actually paused, holding it a moment longer than protocol required, looking out at the audience before looking back at me. "Before I hand this to our next physician," she said, her voice carrying through the microphone, "I want to take a moment to recognize something extraordinary." My stomach dropped. I had no idea what was coming. She spoke about resilience, about a student who had worked 2 jobs through undergrad, who volunteered at a free clinic every weekend without missing a single shift, who mentored first-generation students even while carrying one of the heaviest course loads in our class. She spoke about determination in a way that made it clear she'd been watching me for years, even when I thought no one was paying attention. And then she announced something I never expected: a prestigious scholarship, funded by the hospital board, awarded to a student who exemplified perseverance beyond circumstance. My name echoed through the auditorium like something out of someone else's life. The applause that followed felt like it physically lifted me off the stage. Members of the hospital board, seated in the front rows I hadn't even noticed, stood to clap. A renowned surgeon I recognized from journal articles made his way over afterward to shake my hand and tell me he looked forward to seeing my name in the field. A local news crew, there covering the scholarship announcement, asked to interview me, and within hours, photos and a short segment about a rising medical student overcoming the odds were circulating online. The hospital's official page posted the story. Classmates tagged me in celebratory posts. My name, my face, my story. Suddenly, everywhere. Meanwhile, 3 states away, the ski trip my parents had chosen over me was falling apart in almost comedic fashion. Flights got delayed by a snowstorm, stranding them at the airport for nearly 10 hours. When they finally reached the resort, an unexpected blizzard shut down the slopes for 2 consecutive days, leaving them stuck inside a chalet that had cost more than my entire semester's tuition. Dylan complained the entire time. My mother later admitted she spent most of the trip scrolling through her phone in irritation rather than quality family time. It was on that same phone, buried in a group chat, that she first saw the article. Then the hospital's post. Then dozens of mutual friends and relatives sharing photos of me in my white coat, glowing beside professors and board members. She called me almost immediately, her voice tight in a way I didn't recognize. "Why didn't you tell us it was going to be like this?" she asked, as if I hadn't spent months trying to tell her exactly that. When they returned home, they expected life to simply resume as normal. Instead, they walked into a wave of questions from relatives who had seen the coverage and wanted to know why my parents hadn't been in any of the photos. At the next family gathering, aunts and uncles couldn't stop praising me, asking about the scholarship, the surgeon, the interview, while my parents sat stiffly, offering vague half-answers about scheduling conflicts. Dylan, usually so quick with a joke to smooth over any tension, stayed unusually quiet, shrinking slightly under the weight of comparisons no one needed to say out loud. In the weeks that followed, my parents tried, in their own imperfect way, to reconnect. Expensive gifts arrived that I hadn't asked for. Phone calls came more frequently, filled with apologies that circled around the point without ever quite landing on it. "We didn't realize how big it would be," my father said once, which wasn't really an apology at all. I stayed polite. I answered their calls. I thanked them for the gifts, but something in me had shifted, quietly and permanently, and I no longer bent myself trying to close the distance they had created. My career, meanwhile, began to take shape in ways that surprised even me. Clinical rotations earned glowing evaluations. Mentors began requesting me specifically for research projects. My confidence, once so tightly tied to whether my parents approved of me, started to grow from something more solid. My own competence, my own choices, my own quiet pride in work, well done. Dylan's path told a different story. He changed majors twice more, dropped out of one program entirely, and continued asking my parents for money with a frequency that eventually strained even their patience. The contrast between us became impossible to ignore, not because I ever pointed it out, but because it simply existed, plain and undeniable, at every family dinner and every hushed conversation between relatives. The turning point came almost a year later, when my parents, stretched thin from years of financially rescuing Dylan, found themselves in genuine strain. When Dylan asked for yet another loan, this time for a business idea that sounded suspiciously similar to 3 failed ventures before it, something in my mother finally cracked. She called me, not to ask for anything, but simply to talk, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. That conversation led to another, longer one, weeks later, sitting across from both of them at their kitchen table. They asked, finally, why I'd grown so distant. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply told them the truth I had carried quietly for years, about birthdays skipped, achievements unnoticed, a childhood spent competing for scraps of attention that always seemed to go elsewhere. I told them about the white coat ceremony, about the 2 empty seats that had said more than any argument ever could. The kitchen went silent in a way that felt heavier than any words. I watched something shift in their faces, not defensiveness this time, but genuine understanding, arriving far later than it should have, but arriving nonetheless. My mother reached for my hand, and for once, I let her. I won't pretend everything healed instantly, because it didn't. And forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. But I chose peace over resentment, because carrying anger any further would have cost me more than it cost them. These days, I still wear that same white coat, walking into the hospital each morning surrounded by mentors, colleagues, and friends who showed up for me long before my parents ever learned how. Sometimes the family who celebrates your success isn't the one you were born into. It's the one that chooses to stand beside you when it matters most.